Hello my friends, I hope you're doing great. Well, yeah, we have rainy conditions today. Anyways, I was not surprised, but it was interesting for me to know that Russia net lost 42 of the square kilometers in April. Net loss, I mean that because of the Ukrainian counterattack actions, Ukraine actually gained more territories compared to Russian Federation. And it was happening 2 months before, and it happened from April the 7th till May the 5th. And even though I'm monitoring military maps and I see also Russian advancement, but there are some of the specific points, specific spots where Ukraine also gains lots of the territories, especially in Zaporizhia and Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. So yeah, we have the official number here. For the last 4 weeks, Russia gained 17 square miles of the territories, but at the same time lost 21 square miles. And those numbers themselves, they're really small, because in previous months, like the last year, Russia gained hundreds of the square kilometers or hundreds of the square miles each month. Especially it was visible in the same Zaporizhia Oblast, that they attacked very fast into Gulyaipole settlement. Also in Siversk they were quite successful, but for the last 4 months Russians are mainly standstill. Moreover, we see how Ukraine little by little but changing the situation on the front line in its own favor. So I would say we are now at the breaking point in this war. I'm not sure whether this year is going to be this decisive, because Russia still has its military machine working. They have military production, they're sending soldiers to the front line. Yes, they're not capable to compensate the current losses, but they're at the same time changing their tactics. For example, big assault operations, they're rarely visible nowadays on the front lines, and Russia is mostly concentrated on small attacking groups trying to bypass Ukrainian defense lines. These tactics actually work for Russia in multiple of the occasions, but it was used in combination with mid-wave attacks. Now we see less of those. Guys, just a short reminder, please don't forget to press like to this video and subscribe for the channel. It really matters a lot. And also you may join me on Patreon. The link for it is in the video description below, or on membership of YouTube channel. Thank you so much for it. You're awesome, and let's continue with the video. So I want to quote our officer. He has the channel Officer Plus. He is out there fighting on the front lines. So enemy assaults are a rarity at the moment, so they're happening very rare. He says that even Russian commander idiots realize that they don't have infinite resources. In half a year ago, these idiots could afford to conduct regular assaults. Tanks and BMPs, everything of that was used massively the last year. But this time, those are very, very rare. Due to the shortage of their infantry personnel and other resources, Russians start to concentrate mostly on small attack attempts to penetrate or bypass Ukrainian defense lines with 2, maximum 3 soldiers. The idea is to go to Ukrainian rear as further as possible to cause panic among Ukrainian army, so Ukraine voluntarily withdraws the forces further than needed. Officer mentions that this tactics works just occasionally. In most of the cases, Russian infantry has been cancelled on the way, and they have 80 up to 80% of the losses of their entire infiltration groups. Even on the way to reach the front lines, not even saying about penetrating Ukrainian defense. Officer says that if everything goes as it goes, our enemy will have a huge crisis in attacking forces, and there will be less attacks in general on the front lines. The attacking potential Russia has mainly exhausted in previous years. So in a way, yes, this year could be even a decisive one. Officer says that Ukraine was capable to develop a conveyor of the drones, and the kill zone is expanded very, very far away. And we have those videos coming. I don't know if it is visible for you or not, but Russia is losing their supplies on the way. So all of the Ural trucks, Bukhanka vans, they're being hit not just close to the front lines, not just within 50 kilometers away, but really far away, even on the Russian border. Sometimes Ukraine even conducts the strikes on the Russian territory, on their own logistics, especially in the Kharkiv region, where there is the border in Belgorod Oblast. There are multiple of the videos of how Ukraine hates Russian supplies. And as I said in one of my recent videos, Azov has returned to Mariupol. Yes, for now with only drones, but the operation there is absolutely massive. There is the main road that goes from Rostov-on-Don, Russian territory, then to Mariupol, then further to the south Zaporizhia and Kherson Oblast. This was the main route for the Russian logistics. Well, also they received supplies from Crimea, but that road was also very important. And now I would even say that Ukraine has at least partial control over that road with the drones, with the drone drops, with FPVs, but it is possible for Ukraine to demolish Russian military over there. So if previously Russian soldiers were cancelled right at the front lines or in their attempts to penetrate Ukrainian defense, now the main losses for Russians are happening on so-called Russian-controlled territory. And this distance for the Russian losses, it started to increase gradually. Well, still the most of the losses are happening within 15 kilometers of the front lines, but I think till the end of this year Ukraine will expand it gradually to at least 25, and we'll see about 50 kilometers and even further losses are happening for Russia, but those are around 10%, maybe 20 for now, according to the videos again which I saw. I'm giving you not precise numbers, but I am monitoring what is happening on the front lines every day, and I may understand the picture of what have changed. For example, Ukraine has attacked lots of the Russian air defense systems, and compared to the previous year, Ukraine has intensified the strikes by around 3 times on Russian Tor air defense, Buk M3, S-300, Osa air defense, Panzer S-1 of course. So if before Russia was losing around 10 of the air defense systems per month, now that number increased up to 30-35. So in general, Russia this year could lose more than 400 of the air defense systems. And just imagine those money and this production. Well, money is also becoming a huge problem for Russia, for Russian economy, for the Russian budget. But the production capabilities also play a great role, because Russia, yes, it's still capable to produce weaponry, but not as much as before. They need constant refurbishing of their equipment, but with the sanctions applied, modernization of their equipment is under the big question, because mainly they use Western-made components on their military factories. And before, they even introduced some of the Western spare parts into the military units, like for example aiming equipment Russia is using from the French Thales company, as well as the monitors for their fighter jets, I mean real monitors in the cockpit, as well as other military equipment. So now Russia definitely struggles with that. So in general, Russia, I would say, is reaching its full stop dead end in the war against Ukraine. And because of that, we had some of the information. For now, it's not been published by official Russian media or official Russian channels, but some rumors are out there that Russia is planning maybe even to stop or ceasefire the war. But still, they require to achieve their initial goal to occupy Donetsk Oblast fully. Well, it doesn't mean that the war is going to over. No, Putin is still looking to put the puppet government in Ukraine and occupy most of the territories, but it's gonna be like the stop in the war, pause. Because from what we see, Russia is basically exhausted, I mean physically, their army. They're unable to gain what they gained the last year. And for Putin personally, this war becomes kind of boring, especially nowadays with the White House president who attracts lots of the attention. No one really pays that much attention on Putin as on Donald Trump and his crazy war in Iran. So I would say that the main actual reason of the war in Ukraine is the ambitions of Putin personally and his circle. Putin wanted some движуха. He said about it himself in one of the address to the people, I think it was 2 years ago, that he wanted движуха, but then движуха started to say, oh wow, what is happening? He said about it, he himself, it was his open part of the speech back then, and really he got this attention when everyone was speaking, oh, what Putin would say, what he thinks, what he would do. It's such a huge war, but now this war turns to the standstill. And it doesn't really matter nowadays what Putin might say, because multiple of his red lines have already been crossed by Ukraine. And I would say that people nowadays, they're not taking him seriously. Well, maybe just Donald Trump. Somehow Putin was very successful in brainwashing Donny, Witkoff, Kushner, yeah. That's why before Donny told that Russia could have occupied Ukraine in a matter of days if it wasn't for American help and if it wasn't for the goodwill of Russia. So he doesn't understand the spirit of the Ukrainian defenders and how Ukraine is capable against this second army in the world. So Donny is totally brainwashed. But what is surprising for me, that even with absence of the direct military support from the United States of America, as it was with the previous White House administration, Ukraine is still capable to break this initiative and gain more ground the last months than the Russians did. And those numbers, well, actually they're presented by Ukrainian sources. You may put those under question, but it doesn't really matter that much, because if you open any sort of the military map, including Russian maps, you won't see a huge movement. So initiative for now, I would say it's in a gray zone, like most part of the front line itself. And Ukraine, well, still Ukraine is not capable to return all of the occupied territories by military force. Ukraine, the best thing for Ukraine is just to ceasefire and just wait for the Russian regime to collapse. It is basically inevitable. What is happening now in Russian economy, in Russian morale in general, it will break Russia, maybe even break it apart. Well, Russian regime will not survive it for sure. I already told you about the parallels between Russia and the Soviet Union. It is very close, and Russian regime is looking also for the possible ceasefire, because physically they cannot achieve their goal, but still they need to present something as the victory for their population. That's why they require Donbass that much. At least Donbass we are capable to occupy. But no, judging on what is happening, Russia will have to waste few years and hundreds of thousands more troops to occupy Donbass in the way of how they're attacking right now. So Putin in this situation where he would like to pause, to refurbish his army, to restart his economy in some way, and maybe during the pause some of the sanctions on Russia could be lifted, well, by Americans for sure. Well, Americans already lifted oil sanctions just in attempt to save the oil prices out there in the United States, but it doesn't work well really. So Putin is in the situation where he doesn't have really lots of the options. He might announce some of the mobilization for the Russian army, trying to gain this initiative after all and occupy Donbass finally. On Russian channels there are some rumors ongoing about possible mobilization even this year, but I don't think that it will save Russia. For Russia to occupy Donbass anytime soon, they need substantial increasement of the forces, like 1 million of soldiers at least, and again they will have to spend lots of the time to occupy this most fortified part of Ukrainian front lines. And the Russian economy will have to feed all of those soldiers. So for me it looks unrealistic, especially knowing how many drones the Ukrainian army now has. Well, even mobilization will not bring victory for Russia, and some of the Russian Z patriots even saying about it, that mobilization at the current stage is not capable to save Russian army. Strelkov Girkin himself said about it from Russian prison. But honestly, it is hard to tell real Russian and Putin's intentions about some sort of the pause in this war. Like logically, it should be there, because Russia stopped, and that's why we have those rumors about even the plan published by a Russian regime official somewhere behind the curtains. They discuss it of how to deal in case of this definitely dead end for their army, and how to present this so-called victory for the Russian, especially Z patriots, because they could be angry if Russia, for example, now stops its war in Ukraine and would say, okay, we have reached the goals, but actually they wasted already 1.3 million soldiers, KA or wounded, without achieving a real goal. But maybe Putin is so scared about the possible backlash from those patriots that he is willing to continue the war no matter what, without any visible success, and Ukraine has the chance to break the initiative. Well, I would say that Russia has already lost this war back in 2022 with the failure of Blitzkrieg campaign, and Russia was pushed away from Kiev Oblast, from Sumy, Kharkiv, Kherson region. Later on, Putin thought that the war of attrition could help him, and he put partially at least Russian economy on the war rails, and we see that Putin is actually losing this war of attrition, that Russia is not capable to produce advanced drones which Ukrainian army uses. Yeah, Russians are first in something, for example, fiber optic control drones, but now fiber optics is very expensive. I think it's 7 times more expensive than the last year. There is the crisis in fiber optics. That's why Russia is unable to upscale the production. That's why Ukraine has an advantage in a drone production. Also, Ukraine has an access to the Western technologies, not just China. What Russia has as their decisive weaponry on the front line, well, aviation gliding bombs. They really matter until now. So Ukraine has to withdraw further and leave positions in some points of the front lines, like for example now the fight is ongoing for Konstantinivka, and there Russia used lots, the record number I would say, of the aviation gliding bombs, because they cannot use their own drones, so they demolish entire blocks with a huge FAB 3000 for example, where they think there could be some of the drone operators, but altogether they flatline also Ukrainian civilians who decided to stay there. But with those bombs, Russia cannot win the war in general. It's just one of the tools that gives them some of the advantage sometimes. The main thing is about the drones. This war is about drones, but Russia has Rubicon. Yeah, they have this Spetsnaz unit, they have some of the drone technologies. They somehow may get the access to some of the components produced in the Western countries as well. They do it illegally via the third countries. But in Ukrainian army, there are many of those Rubicons, and I would say that in every brigade there is the drone unit, very capable drone unit, where those are fire brigades and regiments like Azov, 33rd Brigade, 93rd, 225th Brigade. Well, those are really capable, and there are many more capable Ukrainian brigades, but even Ukrainian border control operates with advanced drones. In Russia it is not happening like that. They have infantry, but it is not that technologically advanced and morally advanced compared to Ukrainian defenders. What Russians are still capable to do is to create the pressure on Ukrainian front lines. They constantly press Ukrainian defense with their all-terrain vehicle attacks, motorcycles attacks, infiltration attacks. Massive midways, they are happening rarely. Now Russia, even if they go with motorcycles, they go maximum with 3 of them. Yeah, sometimes I see those convoys, but it happens very rarely. Well, I guess it depends on local commanders, how stupid they are on the places. If some commander drank some vodka and decided to gain some of the positions for the medal, he would send lots of the soldiers. But again, compared to the previous year, it is almost not happening. Now I may rarely show you some of the convoys of Russian vehicles which are being demolished on the front lines. Yes, it's happening, but not very often, let's say. Now interesting videos are coming mostly from behind the front lines of how Ukrainian drone operators, for example, spot the location of the Russian vehicles, of their storages, of their ammunition depots, concentration of the Russian infantry, artillery systems, etc., etc. And of course air defense. Yeah, Russia is losing lots of the air defense, so in a nearby future they will be less capable to defend themselves against those flying drones which fly and destroy even huge Russian oil ports. And this is one more aspect of how Russia is losing this war actually, and how Russian war machine is cracking. Yes, it tries to go forward, but it bogged down completely, and the engine is up to explode. They put full pedal, but it's too old to sustain this pressure, and it's just a matter of time for it to completely explode. But I still expect that this machine to survive at least for the next couple of years. I don't see the reaction from Russian officials that they really want to stop this war or finish it completely. No, Ushakov, Putin, all of them are saying that they want to reach the goals, the same stuff. Negotiations are useless. Especially Ushakov yesterday again said that there could be many more meetings between American delegation, Ukrainian delegation, our delegation, but without Ukrainian territorial concession to Russia, giving up Ukrainian Donbass. The peace agreement in this war is unachievable, and Ukraine should give up its territories for us to start real negotiations. And I think because Russia is unable to achieve its military goals directly on the front lines, it will escalate its terror operations against Ukrainian civilians, and secondary, it will boost its PSYOP propaganda in the Western countries, especially in Europe. They need to cancel the military support for Ukraine. from United Europe. That is only way of how Russia may achieve some of the result out there on the Donbass. We're not even speaking about occupation of Ukraine, but Donbass, Russia, I would say they're not capable to occupy it with the current Ukrainian military support Ukraine has. And the Ukrainian strategy, it is very well visible now. The idea for Ukraine is to cause as many losses for the Russian even infantry as possible. And Ukraine is not taking care about its own controlled territories as before, so Ukraine exchanges those for the Russian losses. Russians themselves, they're saying about it, and they say that it is very smart. Russians admit that they cannot refill their losses with the current volunteer campaign which is ongoing for the Russian army, so it's just a matter of time for either Russia to announce mobilization or to ceasefire. Also, we see how Ukraine breaks through deep inside Russia, again demolishing Russian air defense systems, which allows Ukraine to operate on a further distance with longer range drones, FP1, FP2, reaching Russian command centers, logistics hubs, and I don't see the similar strategy from Russia. Ukraine is now it has huge advantage in middle strikes and even long-range strike. The last month, for example, Ukraine launched more drones on the Russian territory compared to Russia on Ukraine. So this advantage is now clearly visible. I would say Ukraine is at the start of this long-range campaign to hit Russian facilities. Middle range, long range. The end of the year, guys, we will see it will be very, very different, especially with new missiles which Ukraine might have, like FP9, very capable long-range ballistic missile, and Russia has no tool of how to defend itself against those ballistics. Well, maybe S-400, S-300 might intercept ballistics, but it is less successful, way less compared to Patriot PAC-3 missiles. And by the way, about Patriots, there is the huge problem now for Ukraine because of the war in Iran. The defense of Ukrainian cities, the defense of Ukrainian infrastructure really depends on Patriots. Because Russians, they have ballistics which they may launch for the further distance, like for example Iskander and many others. So Ukraine absolutely needs PAC-3, but now there could be some of the delays, and the United States of America already warned European colleagues that there could be delays. Well, I just hope that before the winter time Ukraine gets all of those missiles, because winter time is crucial, it's critical. Especially the previous winter, it was kind of harsh. Temperatures went down to minus 20-25 degrees centigrade. It hasn't been like that in previous winters since the start of the war. So it was definitely difficult, not just for Ukrainian people, it is also important for Ukrainian military logistics. There should be power supplies, there should be electricity, but with those blackouts it may also influence Ukrainian military production and Ukrainian in general military capabilities. But the thing is that those strikes are happening during the winter time, but Russia mainly is not attacking during the winter time. In every sort of the war with the harsh winter conditions, there is the time for armies to rethink the situation on the front lines. It was like that even during the Second World War. Then there was the major pause. Yes, still the front line was boiling and there were some of the changes, but the main breakthroughs were happening during the summertime. And can Russia be successful this summer, for example? I don't think so. I would put at least it under the huge, big question. Maybe in a best case scenario for them, they would occupy Konstantinivka this year and advance closer to reach outskirts of Sloviansk, but not more than that. I also recently looked at the Ukrainian defense lines, especially in Donetsk. Wow, guys, Ukraine is building more defense lines than Russians are capable to penetrate. So the situation for them is the dead end, as I continue to say many times in this video, but it's definitely like that. And yeah, by the way, today is the last day of the ceasefire, and Russia will not prolong it. Zelensky proposed, okay, Putin, let's go and continue this ceasefire. It works very well. Yeah, you still violate it. Russia is still performing its small attacking actions on the front lines, but Russia will go full scale and they will receive more drones on their oil infrastructure, and not only. So this war will continue to not escalate, it actually de-escalates if we see it, but Ukraine escalates it on its own side, creating some of the new volcanoes on the Russian territory. Yeah. Well guys, it's all what I want to say for today. Thank you so much for watching those kind of the outside videos, and please support my job on Patreon. The link for it is in the video description right below, or you may join membership on YouTube channel by pressing button join if you watch me, of course, on YouTube. My friends, because of your support, my job is possible. And also please don't forget to press your like to this video and subscribe for the channel. It also matters a lot. I wish you all a peaceful sky wherever you are and have a great time. Oh, fighter jets. Probably you didn't see them. Those are FA-18s. Nice.